My father got involved in things in the oil fields, which made him, he told me a story later that I didn't understand. He got out of the oil fields. One of the reasons why he got out, he started feeling sick. He was absolutely, he'd come home and there was something about it that was just the pressure of the job, pressure of what he had to do in this environment where there's so many educated people and he's such a fool, and yet he's doing it and they can't, and they're coming out to learn from him. But he told me this story back in the 50s when companies, like he worked for one called, well, I probably shouldn't tell you the name of it. But anyway, it was an oil company. And what's interesting is one of the jobs he had to do once he became a tool pusher, he would go into the small towns before the rig came in, and they'd pay off some of the local politicians, usually the lawyers and judges, because they knew when they would come in and drill that the drilling practices destroyed much of the land that they were on. They would get the rights to, search for the oil. Problem was, when you did this, you had to create sump ponds and you had to create all kinds of runoff areas into the streams, the waters and things around, even to the, you didn't want cattle around grazing in the land because the chemicals that they used were corrosive. It's what they put down in the well and what came back out. But yet he learned that there's some people, some professional groups that you got to pay off in order to get away with that kind of crap. And oil companies did that for years, years and years and years. But somewhere along the line, he began to feel wrong about it. Later on, this was in the early 80s, he was driving trucks. He was an owner-operator, had his own truck. And he had a problem with his engine. The engine blew up on him. And so he had to pull into a truck stop. They rebuilt the engine for him, and it cost him $15,000. Big diesel engines were expensive. Anyway, he got in his truck. My mother was with him. She drove with him on the truck at that time. She couldn't drive, but she could ride with him, keep him company. And they went on down the road. They got several hundred miles down the road, and the engine blew up. He didn't know what the problem was, but he pulls into another place. And it was another truck stop where the first thing they say is, wow, your engine is blown. You need another engine. So they rebuilt the engine again. This time they came out and said, well, there were some parts that were put in wrong. And that's caused the engine to blow. It cost him another $15,000 something. That was, I was in college at the time. This was graduate school. Anyway, I went to see him and I talked to him about this, and I said, Daddy, you've got a great case to go back on that first company because it was, improper, maintenance or improper rebuild of the engine itself. And you can go back and get the first $15,000 back. And my father said, no, I'll make it up somehow. Daddy, $15,000 is a lot of money. This was way back when $15,000 was a whole lot of money. He said, no, I'll make it up some. But Daddy, we can get a lawyer and they'll take this. No, I will not do that. Why? said, I want to have nothing to do with those people. What are you talking about? I don't want to have anything to do with lawyers. Not ever. But you've lost so much money. I'll make it up somehow. And he did eventually, but he absorbed the loss. But what bothers me is my father was afraid of courts. And he didn't trust lawyers at all. And that was when he told me the story. That, yeah, these people are paid off all the time. You can't trust anything that happens with them. I didn't believe him because I was well educated and couldn't believe something like that. That's not the truth. Judicial lawyers, you know, they're just lawyers. They're like anybody. They're just like the rest of us. It was some months later that my brother, Frank, he came to visit with my wife and I. We were I was still in Frankfort, Kentucky, going to school, graduate program. And he had been hurt in the military, and he had had his back broken. It was an accident, but the military treated him terribly. And finally the military just ushered him out. But he couldn't hardly move. He couldn't hardly do anything. He and his wife came to visit with us, and it reminded me of when I would get down. He could go for a while, and then it would just, pain became too much. And that happened. And I said, well, the military should be paying you the disability that you need for these times and all this. And he said, well, they tried and they couldn't get it. So I said, well, I'm going to go try. So I went down to Frankfort, Kentucky to the Veterans Office, and I said, I want to talk to somebody about my brother. I want to talk to somebody about this, you know. And the first thing, are you a lawyer? No, he's my brother, and I want to speak to, well, we can only speak to a lawyer. Huh? We're poor. We can't afford a lawyer. He can't. I can't. We don't. Well, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. He managed to get back on his feet somewhat. And several years later, under another program or for what it was, I don't know, but he got his disability benefits, which he should have had years before, but anyway, what bothered me is when I was in Austin, Texas, those two experiences in my life bothered me. Plus, what I told you about Theonics, it was a strange thing when I died that a near-death experience can be traumatic. And I've had some trauma in my life. But for some reason, that was what I was being told to do. Answer the questions. Why did this happen? Why does a good man fear the courts? That's supposed to be where you go for redress of grievances. When you're done wrong, when a working man loses thousands and thousands of dollars, that's a lot of money to him. Maybe not to a millionaire or a billionaire, but it's a lot of money to a working person. And yet he felt, no, he'll take that loss. And then with my brother, why would an agency as big as the Veterans, why would they treat him this way, and yet no member of his family or anyone can complain? Nope. The only thing I was, you can go get a lawyer for him. I can't afford one any more than he can. Didn't matter. That's the system. When did this happen? When did we lose the right to get into the courts. And then I began to explore the text in the library. And the law libraries, it opened up whole vistas of experiences for me. And I'd run across about a thing here that says, wait a minute, this was a citizen lawyer. What the hell's a citizen lawyer versus a lawyer today? And then I began to learn that a citizen lawyer was like Abraham Lincoln, Clarence Darrow, Sam Houston, all of these different 150 years of people. They were all citizen lawyers. But once the State Bar Acts were passed, citizens lost the right to directly play a part in government. Oh, we get to vote. Yeah. Of course, we don't really have anything to do really with the selection of the candidates that we get to vote for. And that's where I ran across this stupid book, Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler. And I ran across a story that, oh yeah, judicial lawyers love this book when it first came out because it taught them something. Exactly what happened in Germany. Germans didn't notice what was happening until they had lost their own rights. And then by that time, they were at war with the world and being run by a madman. Yet this madman from 1932 up until 1938, when they declared war on the world, he was considered one of the greatest leaders in the world. People respected him. His book, Mein Kampf, was sold all over the world. It was in America, and tens of thousands of people bought it. And it's amazing how big the German population was in America, but there was a huge German population, even here in Texas. And many of those judicial lawyers, those well-educated people, began to say, well, we could do the same thing that Adolf did in Germany. All we got to do is get some of the people in our profession to pass these laws. We'll call them state bar acts. And what we do is we'll set up a state bar for just the members of our profession. Problem is, people didn't notice at the time, they did something called grandfather. They grandfathered in the current judicial lawyers that were already practicing. You know the reason why the judicial legal profession could not take over in 39 and during the Depression? It was because America had one thing that Germany did not have. You know what it was? An armed population. You're talking almost everybody had a gun in their home, maybe not a pistol, but they'd have a gun of some kind that they'd go hunting with or something like this, because during the Depression, hunting was a major source of putting food on the table. My father learned that. He learned to hunt, and what you hunted, it went right in the pot that evening. But they knew how to shoot. And that's the reason why the judicial legal profession could pass the State Bar Acts, but they could not quite take control. They feared the armed populace. See, if they had come in and done what Adolf Hitler did, literally going out into the neighborhoods and beating people up and making sure that any of the competitors who'd run against the Nazis, they'd beat them up. But you see, you couldn't quite do that in America, because if you go out and you have people go out to beat people up, they could get shot. And you couldn't get the police to do it. It took years and years and years for the judicial legal profession to take control of the police departments of America. And nobody even noticed it when it was happening, because it was done as an interpretation of our rights. And yet, one of those rights that we have is you have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed for you. Yeah, that's one of our rights, Miranda. And you know what's interesting? It didn't say you have a right to an attorney of your choice. It says you have a right to an attorney of the judiciary's choice. Yeah. And that's the way it is. But that also gave them the power over the police departments. Every policeman knows the Miranda rights. They have to, if you don't spout those Miranda rights out, you don't get to arrest anybody. And if you do try to arrest someone, it'll be thrown in a court because the court will not allow it. Miranda is the right that everybody has to a lawyer of the judiciary's choice. There are no citizen lawyers allowed. They're not allowed to practice. I'm a citizen lawyer. I've studied laws for years, written contracts, done many of these things, yet I cannot practice law. Couldn't represent my father, couldn't represent my brother. One time I was taken to court, Washington, D.C. I had to fight my own case there. They gave me a lawyer who was being paid for by the state at that time, or Washington, D.C., but he wanted me to plead guilty. Well, he figured he'd get me off with a year sentence. I said, but this is just a comedy of errors. Even the police don't want to prosecute me. Well, you know, but the district attorney, he has a right to do this. Well, then I have a right to fight it. Yeah, but you might lose. Yeah, I might, but I will fight. I will never stop fighting.